Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Incorporate AI with OCI AppDev Services. My name is Nikki Chen and I'm a marketing event manager for the developer initiative here at Oracle. Today we're excited to show you how easy it is for you to use the power of AI for your OCI Application Development Services. If you have any questions during the webinar, please drop them in the Q&A area. We've also set up a Slack channel, Oracle AI ML Services, in our developer workspace. You can access at the QR code or at the link on the screen. This channel will remain open after the event for you to contact us directly whenever you have any questions. Before I pass it off to the presenters, I wanted to let you know we have some amazing events just like this coming up. You can check them out either with the QR code or using the link in the chat. Today's webinar will be presented by Brian Wood and Eli Schilling. Without further ado, I'll pass it to Brian.
And hello, everyone. We are super excited for you to be here and for talking about how you can incorporate AI with OCI AppDev Services. I'm going to do a little, kind of setting of the stage, some context setting, and then Eli is going to do some hands-on work. We also have our colleague Ignacio Nacho Martinez in the background to address your questions. So please do use that Q&A button rather than the chat. All right, as Nikki said, we're here to talk about AI and OCI AppDev Services, specifically how you can train and deploy innovative AI and ML models quickly and cost effectively, and then also to inject intelligence into new and existing apps with powerful pre-built services. So we're going to talk about both models, training and inferencing and such, and then pre-built services for those who maybe don't want to or don't need to mess with the models themselves. All right. Adoption and growth of AI is on fire, right? I mean, the rate of adoption, if things pan out as they're projected, is going to be even more rapid than the internet or smartphones. And that's super exciting. And that's part of the reason we're all on this journey, because it's coming on fast and furious. The reason why it's moving so quickly, I believe, this is my theory, my assertion, that basically it's becoming, the capabilities of AI are becoming so-called good enough for many business applications. So, literally 25 years ago, things kind of got started slowly with handwriting recognition there on the left of the chart, and then speech recognition much more slowly, image recognition picking up the pace. And then you can see things are just really ramping up. The slopes of those curves in terms of like, their ability to reach the so-called human parity. And what is that? Well, that's a subjective level, but I think of it as good enough for business applications. So in other words, it's not a complete waste of time. There are actually use cases that it can be put to work in business context. And again, this is my assertion that that's why things are progressing so rapidly, is because it has sort of reached that tipping point of good enough. Clearly, there's much more to be done to get it to truly pass the Turing tests on all these capabilities, but it really is exciting to see how effective it is in all these different areas. So that's why things are really progressing fast. How is it being used? This slide shows a number of generative AI use cases using large language models. So, call transcripts, content generation for marketing or targeted sales that takes into account customers' history and previous interactions with the customer. Product development, certainly, strategy and finance. You know that the quants and the Wall Street types are using this to really do deeper analysis and mining data even more than they have been with previous capabilities. Those are all generative AI use cases. Now, for some non-generative AI, these are improving very rapidly as well. Digital assistants, or so-called chatbots, speech to text, language, understanding sentiment, and all these sort of things we're familiar with. Vision, being able to identify and more than just identify at speed. You have like millions of images and being able to pick out the anomalies, and then a person, a subject matter expert, having a closer look at that, and then document understanding. Really, again, understanding what all these things are. So those are some of the use cases. It's coming on fast and furious, very exciting. So how can you use application development services from OCI to incorporate AI? Well, good news, Oracle brings AI to you at every layer of our stack, both the SaaS apps, the so-called Fusion, CRM, HCM, ERP, and then AI services. We're going to talk about both pre-built services and then how you can train and use inferencing with models, both off the shelf and any custom models you might bring. The data layer, clearly database and vector store and things like that. That's an important Oracle capability. And then the infrastructure, GPUs, low latency networking, those are essential. So there's definitely an arms race at the infrastructure layer. Oracle has strong advantages at the data layer with databases, and we are innovating quite rapidly and going the extra mile, we believe, to make it easy for you to incorporate these AI services. We're not going to talk about SaaS apps in this particular webinar. There are many other ones that cover that. And then, of course, it takes a village. We've got partners, both technology partners, service partners, to help us bring these capabilities to you. So, themes that you're going to hear for the next 40 minutes or so. Our services enable you to build these AI-powered apps, whether it's custom trained models or these pre-built services, deploy with agility and scalability using cloud-native Kubernetes, our so-called or our OCI container engine for Kubernetes, the OKE service combined with OCI supercluster. We're not going to focus on that so much in this session. What we are going to focus on the most, I'd say, is number 3, innovate with confidence, and really drilling in on what we call the AI Solutions Hub. This is a relatively new section of the oracle.com website, and we're going to show you and take you through hands-on how these solutions present you with instructions, video tutorials, documentation, code, all the kind of essential ingredients you need in your AI kitchen to whip up a tasty meal. Okay, we offer a number of large language models from a variety of providers, Meta, Cohere, and others on the way. One unique thing about Oracle is that we are not creating our own large language models. We are leveraging what we believe are best in class for enterprise use cases. We're not bringing, chat GPT type things or, consumer grade chat bots and such. There's definitely many uses for that, but that's not the business that Oracle is in. We're all about enterprise use cases, and we have selected what we believe are the best models, and we'll continue to evaluate and incorporate additional models. So these are the ones that we offer, but you also can bring your own models. So we're working with Meta and Cohere pretty extensively. How do you access these? Well, through the OCI Generative AI service. If you're not familiar, this is something we announced back at Oracle Cloud World in September, went GA in January, and we've continued to innovate. And so these models are all available through that service. And just a little screenshot, you definitely can fine tune these models. So we offer the foundation models, but then if you choose, you can go fine tune them with your own data and have like a custom version of that model that only you, your organization, can use. There's no sharing of that. Fully hosted on OCI. There's no sharing of data with the model providers. So it's not as if your prompts, your fine-tuning data is being shared with Meta or Cohere or anyone else. That's not the case. It's your data is your data, and we're not sharing that. And that's an important aspect of any cloud service, but particularly with generative AI type services. No one wants their proprietary intellectual property to be shared with model providers. So we're not doing that. And you can use both pay-as-you-go, kind of a shared infrastructure environment, or you can use single tenant dedicated hardware if you want that reassurance in terms of both kind of security as well as the dedicated performance, no noisy neighbor or contention type for resources. If you want to train at scale, good news, we have something called OCI Supercluster. This has got the latest and greatest GPUs from NVIDIA, like the H100s, and as they continue to innovate and come out with better and faster GPUs, we're going to incorporate those. You can truly scale to massive quantities, like literally over 32,000 nodes of these GPU clusters. And then also this incorporates what we call RDMA networking. This is very low latency networking that basically memory to memory on the chips bypasses the compute aspect, the CPU, and it extremely low latency. And this is fantastic for rapid training ability. Time is money in the cloud, and so if you can save, shave off little bits of latency here and there, that adds up to quite a bit when you're talking bajillions of cycles and nodes and bytes of data and such. That's all for model training. Let's say you want to use pre-built services. You don't need a model. You don't need a custom model. That's a bit of overkill for your use case. We have a half a dozen or more of these pre-built services, and you literally connect to them via API. Super easy. This includes the generative AI service, as well as those other non-generative AI services we talked about, chatbot, speech, language vision, and so on. Super easy to connect to those, and many of the use cases within the AI Solutions Hub cover all of these areas. So it's not like we're just skewing toward one type of AI. We run the gamut, and all those capabilities are listed there. So innovate with confidence. This is really what, again, this webcast is all about. And I'm just going to tee this up, and then I'm about to hand things off to Eli to take us through and show us in real time some hands-on work. The AI Solutions Hub, super excited. You can go to it, oracle.com/AI solutions. It's like a vanity URL. It will resolve to a longer URL, but and you can just navigate to it as well on the site. But here's what it looks like. This is just a small screenshot. There are currently 15 or more solutions listed. We actually have the intention of adding orders of magnitude more of these solutions on there. So we've got a lot in store and in the pipeline. And the idea here is to make it very easy for you to get started. So there's a little 2-minute type video description. There's links to, as I mentioned before, code, like out on open source repository like GitHub. There's instructions, like literally documentation and step-by-step. There's longer videos where you can follow along, pause, do your thing, continue, and such like that. So the whole idea is, hey, sometimes when you walk into a store and there's like just massive quantities of things available to you, it's overwhelming, right? So we want to make it easy. So all those tools are available to you, but sometimes it's nice to just sort of follow a little template, so to speak, and get going. And then after you do a couple of those, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Now I can branch off on my own and take it to the next step. All right, now it's time for some live demo. Eli, are you there?
I am here.
All right, it's time for you to take it away.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for teeing this up, Brian. Appreciate the intro and the great material shared so far. As Brian mentioned, we're just going to kind of run through some of these solutions that are available. And this the Solutions Hub here is essentially growing every day. We are working furiously and feverishly to produce new content, new real-world examples, so that it makes it easier for folks to come in and start consuming and ideating through the various business cases or business use cases available with AI in the cloud. So you can see here, we just scroll through any number of the solutions that are available. In particular, today we're going to look at the chatbot option here. So as was alluded to in the slides, we're going to kind of start off with a quick video. And I won't play this, but if you want to come check it out, it's just a really short video that kind of introduces the solution, what we're going to cover, what's available, what the capabilities are. And you can see here, it's all of a minute and 38 seconds. So just kind of a primer for what's going to be incorporated here. The prerequisites in terms of signing up for an OCI account, getting the SDKs, the documentation that's incorporated. And then we're going to jump out to GitHub to actually kind of dive deep into this solution. So that's going to open up in a new tab here. You'll see here we have a full GitHub repo for each of these AI solutions, and that incorporates some additional detail here. So for this particular option, we have two different scenarios. There's RAG with Gen AI agents. We'll take a look at those. And then there's also the automation with ORDS there. If I jump into the first one, you're going to see a lot of great detail. So this is really where the rubber meets the road. I want to go through this step by step. I want to figure out how it works. I want to implement the solution in my own OCI tenancy. And so you'll see here, we're going to be working with Redis. We're going to have an OpenSearch cluster deployed. We're using OCI Compute. We'll look at the reference architecture here in just a minute. And then we're going to use those Gen AI agents to sort of augment the capabilities of our application. All right, coming down here, again, I'm not going to go through these step by step. We kind of have a demo environment set up, and I'll show you a little bit about how it works once it's all put together. And I encourage everyone to come back here and walk through this and give it a shot for yourself. So we are going to go through the process. I have my environment set up over here, and you can see what I've done is essentially clone the GitHub repo. So this has some scripts around basically generating some random data. In this case, I've generated a bit of data. We're going to basically create kind of a fake healthcare scenario here where we've got a bunch of patient information and we want to be able to have a conversation and evaluate some different capabilities or resources around, you know, what information do we have on our patients? Maybe there's, you know, there's some medical needs and we want to be able to evaluate that against the underlying large language model with the relevance of the current and accurate patient information. So this is basically just a bunch of random information that was generated. We've loaded this into the OpenSearch cluster so that we were able to search through this and evaluate or retrieve that information using the RAG agents as part of our application environment or application ecosystem. Let me just jump back over here really quick. So once we generate the data, we're going to upload that to our OpenSearch cluster. That allows us to essentially easily access the different vectors of data, essentially based on the index of each data set that we upload. And then we're going to come down here. We're going to create a private endpoint for that information so we can access this, you know, within our private application environment within OCI. So we, you know, this type of information is highly sensitive. We don't want to expose it out to any external resources. So we want to cordon that off in our private subnet in our network. We're going to create a data source that allows us to access that information. So for the sake of this demo, we're essentially just going to be accessing that from a command line. We could also access that from the RAG agent itself. We'll kind of go through that process. So let me just kind of come down here to the end. I do want to show the reference architecture of the demo solution that has been built. So once deployed, we have our OCI subnet in the region. In that subnet, we have a public, or sorry, in that VCN, we have a public and a private subnet. And the private subnet is where we're going to be isolating these private secure resources. So that's where our OpenSearch cluster is deployed. That's where our Redis cluster is deployed for caching to speed up the query process against our OpenSearch cluster. Those, of course, both have access to the Oracle Services Network, where the Gen AI playground and the RAG agents are accessible and available for interacting with the large language models. And then, of course, in the public subnet, we have our Bastion, our virtual machine, and this is going to allow us to connect into our environment from across the internet and then interact with those services in the private subnet. So this is something that's pretty consistently used throughout both cloud and I would say even in some on-prem network environments. So it's also kind of called a jump box, but it's a way to isolate public and private access to our resources. So we'll just take a quick look actually at Gen AI service here. I think I saw a question earlier. So this is in a public beta right now, and it's available in the Chicago region. So if you are able to apply for and get access, you would need to make sure that you are able to get to the Chicago region, which is US Midwest. And essentially we'll come in here. If you just search for Gen AI, you'll see right here, there's the generative AI, and then there's the Gen AI agents. The Gen AI service, the difference there is it's going to take you to, oops. So this is sort of the fully loaded training and model training generation service. So this is kind of like the managed cluster networks that Brian was talking about earlier. So if I need to come in here and actually either create a new model or create custom models or train existing models, this is kind of a managed abstraction of enabling me to do that without having to go and deploy the infrastructure and the services and the resources myself. So that's Gen AI, but we want to talk about the Gen AI agents. So we're going to jump over there. And we'll take a quick look. There's a few that are already in here. The patient administrator is the one we're going to be working with today. But to get that set up, we've basically gone and created some private endpoints, some data sources, and some cache stores. In this instance, the data source, we've got a few different options here. But in this case, the number 11, this is essentially an index in our OpenSearch cluster. That's where we've decided to store the information for this particular scenario. The private endpoint, so for the patient endpoint here, you can see we've generated, it has a DNS entry in my network environment, so I can access that. My applications could essentially make an API call to the endpoint to interact with or retrieve the data. So that kind of simplifies the app dev portion of this. And then, of course, the cache stores here, we've enabled this for the application as well. So this is going to be our Redis endpoint. And again, Redis is that in-memory cache. It's going to basically store the most commonly retrieved records that are returned from the OpenSearch query and store those for faster future access. All right, let's take a quick look at the agent itself here. So in this particular situation, we're going to configure a data source for the agent. Again, that's going to point to a particular shard or array of data in the OpenSearch cluster, which in this case is that index 11 that we mentioned. And then from here, this basically the launch chat is kind of just a basic interface that allows us to kind of experiment with and interact with the agent. But once this has been created, we actually get an API endpoint, and that allows us to now programmatically interface with the RAG agent. So once we've defined our data source, our endpoint, and the rest of the resources necessary, now I can basically go out to my application, whether it's a similar chatbot, whether it's a scheduling tool, if we're talking kind of the whole hospital or healthcare theme, it could be a patient management system. And anytime I pull up a patient, or I go to schedule a patient, or I'm doing research on an existing patient, my application might need to make a call to the RAG agent to go find out and do some sort of correlation. So we'll look at a few examples here in just a minute, but you can kind of think about the practical application of, once I have the large language model, the external data set, I wrap my RAG agent around that, and now I can start integrating additional functionality into my application. So if we hit the launch chat with agent, it's going to bring up a nifty little window here. As I mentioned, this is just kind of a basic interface. Once you have that API endpoint, you could go use something like Jet or React or any other number of front-end app dev tools to build your own custom interface if you wanted to present this type of functionality to your app users. Or you simply utilize that API endpoint to go make programmatic calls inside your application construct, return different values, different data, and then make application decisions based on that information. Before we get in here, let me just jump over really quick. This is the Bastion server I mentioned earlier. So this is in a public subnet. It has connectivity and allows access to the resources in the private subnet. If we take just a quick look, there's some generated data here. And this again, there's a Python script in the GitHub repo that you can run to generate a bunch of random information. This is going to give you a number of patients, some information about them like their blood type, some completely erroneous and made up addresses, doctor visits, medical records, etc. So it kind of gives us something to work with. Once we load this into OpenSearch, there are a few ways we can kind of go back and look at it. And we're essentially just going to use the curl command with either get, post, or put to interact with that OpenSearch endpoint. And in this case, we're going to just basically do a search of index 11. And that's going to show us all of the patient data that we loaded previously. So again, as we start to fill this in and interact with our different data sets, you can kind of see what we have available to us here. And that's basically what we had in the JSON file. So let's go talk to our agent here. So as a patient admin, let's just get some information about let's try that one more time. A little refresh there. Can you use me on Mary? Cool. So at this point, it's basically going to go look, find the record, and evaluate, in kind of a natural language manner, return the information about Miss Poole in this instance. So you can see here just the basic information, and we've returned a couple of references on the right side. So you can see here the information essentially that was returned about Mary. Nothing too terribly exciting here because we've not really interacted with the the LLM. It's just kind of a basic query. But again, we returned information with natural language versus having to construct any sort of structured query, so to speak. We're going to kind of set ourselves up here, keeping in mind this is context aware. So the more information we query, the more data we sort of look for. The session here is going to keep track of all that, so we can kind of start to load up the context and then be able to ask different and more complex questions as this information comes together. So we want to figure out what Mary's address is. We want to essentially put that, let the agent know that her address is her location, in case we want to ask it questions later about, find an urgent care center closest to Mary, or, if Mary needed to fill a prescription, what's the closest pharmacy, things like that. So that's where we would kind of begin to leverage the additional LLM capabilities. Now, I do want to add a little extra context here because we're going to start to evaluate. Let's say, for example, Mary has a condition, and we're looking for another patient that has a compatible blood type. And, perhaps that's Mr. Briggs here. Although I might have, by asking for Mary's address, I might have affected the context. Let's try this here. Gotta be kind of careful with that. Again, that's kind of how the agent builds its context. But what if we asked whether John could donate blood to Mary based on their blood types? So this, of course, is going to go to that OpenSearch cluster, return the blood type for each of the individuals. And of course, we don't have any information about the compatibility. So at this point, we've got to go look at the LLM to figure out what the compatibility is in terms of blood transfusions. And so comes back with, yes, John can donate. Mary is blood type B negative, John is A positive. However, a person can only so doesn't give us a whole lot of information here, but if I wanted to know more, we could find out. Would you like me to list the blood types and their compatibility for you? Yes, please list the blood types and their compatibility. Compatibility. There we go. And again, this is going to take advantage of that underlying LLM to return the information about how and why these two individuals have compatible blood. All right. This may be a situation where I have impeded the context of the chat. So let me just give it one more shot here, really quick, before we move on. So we're just waiting for the statistics about the query. So I didn't touch on these earlier, but the answerability here is basically referencing whether the document's available, answer the user's question, 1 being 100%, 0 being absolutely not at all. And then the groundedness is essentially the percentage of how the answer is based on the reference documentation. So you can see there a value of 60% or more means essentially we use all the information in the document to answer that. Now let's go ahead and ask about John. There we go. So you can see, because I asked in the previous chat about Mary's location, the context for my query was essentially when I asked about John, the agent thought I was hoping to get John's address because that was the context of the discussion. Now that I've come back and I've skipped that question, we're just asking about general information. Now I know about Mary, I know about John, and if I wanted to come in and ask that blood compatibility again, I should be able to dive a little bit deeper into the blood transfusion details. So it's interesting because while the AI is learning and while we're tuning our models and such, you know, I think we ourselves learn along the way. So becoming more and more effective at how we prompt these different AI tools to retrieve more effective responses. So if we asked for more information now, and there we have it. So not necessarily a medical level dissertation here, but it's going to give you kind of a high level of, you know, the matching blood types and how the compatibility works in the situation. So pretty slick. Again, each time we do the query, it's going to give us a reference back from that. Oops, back from that. In this case, you know, because we were talking about John and his blood type is A, it is going to say there's a potential second reference because Douglas Sanders also has blood type A positive. Even though the chat is, or the agent really is only incorporating the information about John, it does give us a second potential option that it found in that data source, in that array or that index. So if we did need to dig a little bit deeper, we could always go start asking questions about Douglas as well, because there's some similarity, some compatibility there. It's just a way to see those additional data points. I had one more thing I wanted to show just really quick, and this is kind of a little bit of a deviation, but if you are, working with various open source LLMs or looking to experiment with some of these different models, and you just want a really simple tool, this is kind of an open source tool that I've used in the past. It's deployed on Kubernetes, which makes it really easy to essentially tweak and tune and adjust how it works. But the nice thing about this particular tool is I can go in and I can pick any number of models. Depending upon whether I'm running on compute or GPU, you want to kind of evaluate the size of the model you're planning to use. But of course, some basic inference capabilities with the smaller parameter models tend to work pretty well, with a large number of threads on CPU. So in this case, you've got Llama all the way from 7 to, I was looking for a different one, Llama 2, there we go. So all the way from 7 billion to 70 billion parameters. Once those models have been downloaded, we simply start a new chat, adjust the parameters, pick the model. And in this case, I had limited capacity. Typically for CPU, you do 1 thread per core. And I only have 2 cores available, so I'm not going to go through that. Typically, you'll want about 60 to 70 cores to start making that work properly. But this, start the chat from here, and then we can begin to kind of have a discussion. This is quite dissimilar from the topic we just covered. This is purely an LLM interaction. There's no retrieval augmented generation associated. But this could be if you're evaluating different models or kind of looking to get started for the very first time. And you go out to a site like Hugging Face and there's like 3,000 models to pick from. Maybe we can kind of evaluate some of the core models and identify where we want to start.
Eli, there were a couple questions on that the open source thing you were showing, the Surge, in terms of like whether it's an OCI service and such. But if I understand it correctly, it's not an OCI service, correct?
Yeah, it's not. So basically, it's running on our managed Kubernetes service. And this is something, oh, I'm in the wrong directory. So basically, there's a public, and I can find a way to share this information out if folks are curious. Basically, there's just a public container image for this. And then what you're seeing here is the deployment YAML for Kubernetes. And this is essentially going to stand up a single pod on the Oracle Container Engine for Kubernetes. There are some persistent volume claims. It uses an underlying block storage volume to store the models that you download. And it attaches a load balancer to make this publicly accessible to the internet. So pretty straightforward stuff, but it is a third-party tool that I've simply deployed on Kubernetes for this demo.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Back to you, Brian.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to grab the screen share back, and we still have time, so we've got 15 more minutes for more questions, and then we'll stop at the top of the hour. Basically, just reiterate and summarize here. So Oracle provides a number of ways to help you incorporate AI into your applications. Some of them have to do with training of models. So either models that we offer from Meta and Cohere and others that you can fine tune or you can use just as is, like off the shelf, as well as pre-built services. And one of those pre-built services that that Eli was showing you was this OCI generative AI agents, which is still in beta. So there's still, maybe a few rough edges we gotta smooth out. But we wanted to kind of share with you sort of the latest and greatest. The other ones: speech, vision, language, document understanding, digital assistant, or so-called chatbots. Those are all much more mature. They've been in service for a year or two. The generative AI service has been GA for about 3.5 months. And then again, the agents is in beta. And we'll continue to innovate and come out with new services, more capabilities, updated underlying models and things like that, between both generative AI and non-generative AI type services. What we did not really talk about today, but since we've got a moment or two here, I'll discuss it briefly, is how you can use Kubernetes combined with OCI Supercluster to deploy AI ML services. What is not necessarily generally known, but is true, is that the majority of AI services are deployed on Kubernetes. And in point of fact, with Oracle and our OCI AI services, all the ones I just kind of outlined, they're all deployed on our managed Kubernetes service. So in other words, the OCI generative AI service, speech, language, vision, document understanding, chatbot, you name it from OCI, they're all deployed on our OCI Container Engine for Kubernetes service, or OKE. And the reason for that is the agility and scalability and the fact that basically, using the declarative approach of Kubernetes, containerized applications and the microservices is just very easy and efficient to deploy these, what are often resource intensive services. It's much easier to deploy them using Kubernetes to orchestrate all those containers and all those resources than to try to do it manually using VMs or bare metal. So the cool thing about OCI Container Engine for Kubernetes, or OKE, is that you literally can use all the different compute types that OCI offers. And that's everything from bare metal GPUs to virtual machines and processor type, Intel, AMD, Ampere, NVIDIA, and as companies continue to come out with new and enhanced GPUs and lower cost CPUs, and all those are available to you. Another thing that is maybe not generally known, but it's important to understand, is that while GPUs are pretty much essential for AI model training, they're not necessarily required for inferencing. So training your models, yes, you need GPUs. Inferencing or exercising or using those models to produce results, in many cases, lower cost CPUs, lower cost and higher availability, meaning there's so much demand for GPUs, sometimes it's hard to get your paws on them in a particular region, but there's much more supply, so to speak, deployed supply in our regions for CPUs that in many cases our customers are starting to use CPUs for inferencing, which is financially much more efficient and makes it easier operationally because of that availability. But regardless of what type of microprocessor is used, Kubernetes is a great way to deploy them. So that's something that you'll see more and more from us in the coming weeks as we share our own internal success stories, how we've employed OKE, and then how our customers are deploying that. So we covered a little bit of this at Oracle Cloud World last year, and then you'll see a bunch more this year at OCW. And then number 3, the Innovate with Confidence. That's the Solutions Hub that Eli walked us through. He just touched on one of the many solutions, the the recipe, so to speak, with the summary and the code and the instructions and the documentations. We want to make it easy, and so that's why this webcast exists and many more like it in the coming weeks to make it easy for you. One of the questions was, hey, how can we get more training on the generative AI agents service? That's coming. Since it's still in beta, we haven't deployed everything yet in terms of documentation and training and technical specs and everything, but that will come when it goes GA. I don't have a specific GA date yet, but stay tuned. Believe me, there is massive demand from all corners, so we're pushing as quickly as we can. We don't want to release anything kind of before it's fully baked. So
hey Brian, really quick,
yeah,
just wanted to jump in here. There is a new training and certification path that came out from Oracle University just like a week ago. I'll put it in the chat. There's a 2024 generative AI professional certification and course that's available. So for folks that want to check that out, I'll put that in the chat. It is hot off the presses, so a lot of good information there.
You are right. In fact, I'm going to call an audible here and do something. I created a slide with a QR code for that training. And because we live in the age of wondrous power, boom, there you go. Scan that QR code, and that'll take you to this free certification for the Oracle Generative AI training. It's valid through the end of July, so you've got a couple months to do that. Great call there, Eli. This is good stuff. We want you all to be enabled. We want to share the love, share the training, and make you comfortable with these capabilities. And then probably the most technical slide you'll see from us in this webcast is basically a little architecture diagram, but basically across the board, we talked about the layers, the vertical layers of the stack, but then within kind of that OCI services layer, you can see all the different languages and tools and frameworks. We talked a little bit about Cohere, Meta, but then there's also things like PyTorch and TensorFlow and Slurm if you want to get a little bit more hands-on. We talked a little bit about OKE, the Kubernetes service, but there's also the API gateway and Apex. Apex is a great tool for low-code application development. If you want to just use that API connectivity to some of those pre-built services, you can do that with Apex and very rapidly spin up a proof of concept and play with it and see maybe spark some ideas on how you can incorporate some of these services into your existing applications. If you want to breathe a little bit new life, new capabilities into an existing service, or might form the foundation, a gem or a germination kernel of an idea for a new service. And then some of those, we didn't even talk about the OCI data science and some of the other capabilities more on the database side of the house. But there's, if you can't already tell, we've just sort of scratching the surface of these capabilities to whet your appetite. Okay, I see a couple questions in the chat. Thank you, Nacho, for addressing some of these. I'm going to take a quick read of those. Eli, is there anything more that you wanted to say while I'm looking at these questions?
No, I'm good for now. Thanks for the time.
Okay, let's see here. I see a question about Oracle Primavera Cloud. Unfortunately, I personally do not know anything about that, so I'm going to have to pass. How's Oracle integration AI enabled? Well, so the integration team I know is incorporating AI to make it easier for customers to find and connect to applications, data sources, etc., in hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So kind of regardless of where those repositories are of data or with these applications, to make it easy to connect to those. So not only do we have the kind of the recipes and the pre-built connectors, but They're incorporating AI to make it even easier to just using natural language to, describe what it is that you want to do or find or connect to, and then make that linkage. So that's about the extent of my specificity of knowledge, but I do know that there are Cloud Customer Connect webinars that specifically talk about these capabilities. So I'd encourage you to go to the Cloud Customer Connect portion of oracle.com and seek out some of those, whether they're recent recordings or upcoming webcasts where they talk about that. There's also the integration office hours, which are an outstanding resource for learning specifics from the product managers and the engineers themselves on high specificity on responses there. Let's see, any other questions? There will be one final poll, so don't bail on us yet, please. We want to ask you basically what you thought of this webcast. How can we do better? What types of content do you want to see in the future? Okay, I'm about all out of words, Eli. I'm going to give you last chance. You get the final word, and then we'll hand things back to Nikki to close us out with that final poll.
Try it. That's 2 words, but I think the crux of all of this is just getting your hands on the keyboard and experimenting and learning and becoming familiar with the tools and the capabilities and sort of inventing your own art of the possible. So I encourage everyone to go check it out.
Love it.
And
Love
thanks
it.
for the time today.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. Thank you, folks. If you haven't done so already, take a screenshot of this QR code or swipe it to scan it with your phone.
Well, if you like today's session, we'd love to invite you back to check our upcoming events. We have also loved to hear your feedback and what topic you'd like us to cover in the future. And with that, I'll go ahead and end the session and hope to see you soon.